It's time for Retro Talk with Retro Rose here on
WXPM
on 98.5
FM.
Welcome back to Retro Talk.
Retro Talk here on 98.5 The Phoenix with your host,
Retro Rose.
And The Bro Show, here to talk about one of our favorite shows of all time.
One of our favorite cartoons.
Yes.
What cartoon is it?
Here we go. I'm going to go for it.
All right, you go for it. I'm going to go for it.
This is a rare time, everybody, that you're going to hear The Bro Show sing. Truly, truly, truly outrageous, the world of Jam. She's truly outrageous, glamour and glitter, fashion and fame. Truly, truly, truly outrageous.
We are the misfits, and we're gonna get her.
Jam, truly outrageous, contagious. Jam is my name, no one else is the same. Jam is my name, Jam.
Now we've lost all of our listeners. Let's go on to talk about Jim and the Holograms.
Jim and the Holograms.
And my favorite band, the Misfits.
Yes, you were. You were Stormer, as I recall.
Yes. I love the Misfits.
Yes.
Although we need Jim because she's a good girl.
Right.
I've always went with the bad girls.
Yes, you did. You were always a bad girl. As we've learned in other previous shows, you were a bad girl.
Yeah, I got in a lot of trouble.
But you know what? Stormer was the bad girl with heart, and that's you.
You know what Stormer was? And for those that don't know, Stormer is actually one of the Misfits. And if you're listening to this and you know Jim and the Holograms, you know who the Misfits are. Stormer got in with the wrong crowd, is what it was. She was a decent girl, and she got in with the wrong crowd.
Right. Well, I love Jim and the Holograms. Just the conceit of the show was the fact that it was a cartoon show that came out during kind of the big era of cartoons. And this was one of those Hasbro-related toy shows where you had Transformers, you had G.I. Joe. That's the boys' market.
Yeah.
And Hasbro was like, you know what? We're going to compete with Barbie directly. We're going to go head on, and we're going to make a cartoon called Jem and the Holograms.
And all these cartoons that he's mentioning were actually produced by Sunbow, but they were directed by a talented man, Wally Burr. And he actually pushed these actors to do he pushed them. He pushed them to the limit to get it right. And that's what made these shows so great.
And with something like Jem and the Holograms, you also had not only the element of the actors doing the show itself, but they produced 2 to 3 songs per 30-minute episode or 22-minute episode.
Yeah, I think some of them was definitely 3 songs. Sometimes there was 4 in there in an episode.
Yeah. And to think that this show started out initially as part of an animation block where they would show like 7 minutes of a cartoon at a time, and they did this for, I think it was 10 or 12 weeks that equaled out to be like 5 normal episodes, which was crazy to me at the time, but I caught on to it and I loved it. I loved the conceit of a hologram generating computer. And as a boy, I wanted to know more about that, and that drew me in. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I'm a boy. I'm going to watch this show. And I've watched it religiously.
And when he mentions a hologram, who actually is Jim? What's her real name? That
would be Jerrica Benton. And Jerrica Benton runs a house called Starlight House with her sister, Kimberly.
Yeah, the Starlight Foundation.
Yep.
And who started the Starlight Foundation?
Her parents.
Yeah, her parents did. And her father was the one that made the computer.
Yep.
That made the holograms. But what was the name of the computer?
Synergy.
That's right. Synergy.
That's right.
And she actually was invented by the dad. And the parents, from what I understand, I believe that they were both killed in a plane crash.
That's correct.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was the father lived on a little bit longer, but I think both of them were killed in the same plane crash.
He left the instructions for them to be able to find the computer that had Synergy in it, and then said, you have all this musical equipment, use this to produce shows that you can make money to run the Starlight House.
And so it's an orphanage, too.
Right.
They've got... we'll talk about the toys later on, but there's actually 3 girls that live in there, 3 young girls. They're called the Starlight Girls.
Yep.
And now Jerrica, who is Jim, is actually real sisters with Kimber. They were the kids that the mom and dad had, and then they adopted a couple kids.
Right.
And what were those 2 kids?
That would be Aja and Shayna, that's right.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
He was thinking for a minute.
Yeah. The smoke was coming out of my ears.
But I could smell the smoke. But so Starlight Foundation started out as a orphanage.
Right.
Parents adopted kids, and the father was really talented. He had this technology. He was a scientist type guy.
Right.
And that's how it all started. They weren't a rock band at first. They were just adopted kids, the two daughters. And I'm guessing they just got musical talent. And from what I understand, I think their mother had some musical talent. I think there was an episode where the mother was playing a guitar and singing, and this is supposed to be like in the 70s.
Yep.
So it has that 70s feel to it.
It was showing the young girls how they could sing and how to do chords and things like that.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it was a talented family they came from, and the family had money, obviously.
Right.
Because the house they live in is huge.
And then they started the Starlight Music as well to combat the evil music group that was run by Eric Draven. Yes.
And didn't they actually have a theater? I seem to remember there was a drive-in involved.
Maybe. That's where the computer was.
Yeah, so maybe the father owned the drive-in. That might have been part of the reason why he had money.
Yep.
Because drive-ins probably were popular back then.
They were definitely popular back then.
Yeah, so that's probably where some of the money came from.
So now, do you remember what Jerica would have to do?
And Eric actually, not to cut you off from that for a second, but Eric actually worked for their father, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that right?
And he took contracts to make Jerica/Jem work for him initially, but then she was able to buy it out with a prize money that she got, but also the money from her family to be able to make her own music company.
And this is the reason why he hates them now.
Mm-hmm. He knew he had a hit band on their hands, and they said, no, we don't want to work with you.
And so what were you going to say about Jerica?
Well, now they find all this computer equipment. They have all these holograms they can create, but how would they get it turned on? What would she have to do?
She would have to touch her earring and say, Showtime Synergy.
It's Showtime Synergy with the...
Yeah.
I loved it.
And for those that... We're going to talk about the toys, but there actually is dolls that their ears would light up. Her ear would light up if the battery didn't die. Nowadays, you can't find one where the battery hasn't died.
Right. Oh, my gosh. But the show was just great. It was music. It was geared towards girls, but it also had a lot of adventure, and it was very soap opera-y. Yeah,
it was very soap opera-y, but they did have a lot of music, too. It was almost like what we were talking the one time about Kids Incorporated, that it drawed the kids just because it had the music.
Yes.
And kids loved music. And when I mentioned the Misfits, I liked the Misfits because they were a little bit more harder rock.
Yes.
Where Jem and the Holograms sung more love stories, Misfits were like the rough songs, like, well, I want to kick your butt type stuff.
Although, let's not ignore the fact that the Misfits and Jem and the Holograms had very unique looks and everything, and I loved both looks that they had. But when you look at the Misfits, I also see the band Poison.
Yeah,
They are almost the exact same look. The guys from Poison dress like the Misfits from Jem and the Holograms.
Even though Jem and the Holograms had makeup, usually it was light blue, pink, yellow, stuff that was, mild, like Easter colors almost.
Yeah, pastels.
And then the Misfits were all dark colors. Like there was dark purple, dark green,
neon green, fishnets.
Green, black.
And then,
you knew they were bad girls.
Right, and
they wore chains too. They had like different things. Their earrings were different and everything. The look was totally different.
The big thing too that I always noticed was their hair. The Jem and Holograms had, pink hair. They had purple hair. They had blue hair, things like that. But then the Misfits, it was a very stark green or a very stark dark blue, or it was a white, like very sharp white contrast. And I love that. Like they had such unique looks that any person who put that makeup on, you knew what they were coming from.
And for those that heard the Eric Raymond thing, after Jerica parted ways with him, he actually got the Misfits to join him. And Pizzazz was actually one of his first girls, and her father has money too.
Yep.
And I trying to remember her real name? Phyllis, I think it was.
It was Phyllis.
And he hated it because she would, she'd come in and see him and he was calling her Phyllis. And I was like, my name is not Phyllis.
It's Pizzazz.
Yeah, but boy, that's a horrible name, too, Phyllis. I don't think I could have stand that name either.
So you had Pizzazz, you had Stormer, who was the other misfit.
Oh, that was Roxy.
That's right.
Roxy. But there's more that's going to come with the Misfits. We'll mention that later on. We'll mention some more of the characters that come in the second season.
Yep.
But, yeah, there was quite a few, and it was fun. It was a fun show. It's definitely something that's going to be fun to talk about. There was a toy line episodes. There was definitely kids' clothes. I think there was some kids' clothes.
Yep,
Not
there
a
were
whole
costumes
lot.
and such.
Costumes for sure.
Yep.
There was a lot of stuff that came out for that series.
And there's still marketing and toys out today that we can talk about. Later in the show.
We can talk about that. Toys that have been released. The only thing I don't think they released was bed sheets.
I don't think so.
I don't think there was. There was a sleeping bag, though. I know there was a sleeping bag.
Did you have the sleeping bag?
No,
Retro
but I've
Rose?
seen it in wish books and such.
You know who I bet had the sleeping bag?
You.
No, Tony in the basement.
Tony in the basement? He might have had it.
I think he had one.
Let's talk about some of the things that was in Jim's life, like Rio.
Who?
Rio, that was her boyfriend. Well, it's kind of an odd relationship.
It's very complicated.
It's very complicated.
Because Rio's in love with Jerica, but thinks he loves Jem, and they're two separate people to him, but she's the same person.
She actually got jealous a few times.
She got jealous of herself.
She got jealous of herself because he wanted to spend more time with Jim sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it was like, what?
It's that very soap opera nature of the show where it appealed. That's what appealed, I think, for lack of a better way to put it, to the girl audience. But even the boys were getting caught up in it. And that's where we learned this can happen. Is this puberty I'm feeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you come in with the drama stuff.
Right.
Because she's upset because Rio likes Jim.
And then there's, of course, all the times that Pizzazz tried to steal Rio herself.
Yeah, she tries to do that. And I remember there were several episodes where Jerica's sister, Kimber,
yes,
is the type of girl that's always dating someone new. Mm-hmm. And Rio would mention that sometimes.
Yes.
He would watch her and like, your sister's always going out with someone new, I just don't think he had entirely a lot of respect for that.
Right. And what I always found fascinating for Rio is he's their single roadie. He's the only person that sets up all of their stuff for all of their concerts. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's some cartoon magic
him hard.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They worked him hard, and I honestly think that's where a lot of the drama comes from, though, because you're watching a show. It's not like Transformers. I mean, G.I. Joe, they're constantly at war. Transformers are constantly at war. But for Jim and the Holograms, there was a lot of real life stuff that girls would be dealing with when they get older.
Agreed.
Because they're kids right now.
Right.
But by the time they got into high school or, they're preparing for adults, this is what adults go through every day. Like so-and-so's dating this person's teasing this person, and it was more real life stuff.
Well, the first 5-parter dealt with them trying to maintain the deed for the Starlight House, to keep it in their ownership so that it doesn't get taken by Eric himself, because he had the deed as part of the deal that they don't own the music or anything for him. Guess what? He'll sell the house and the kids have to find a new place to live. And they're all scared. They don't know where they're going to live. That's the whole gist of why they became Jim and the Holograms.
Yeah, and it's more like I wouldn't say it's completely drama, but it's more of a drama type show. I mean, it's real to life, not like, Transformers was great, but I don't think you're going to see Optimus Prime walking down the street every day like you would see maybe a rock star walking down the street,
right?
Or someone that's a rock band member. You see that every day still,
Right, and there is one connective tissue, one little character that is actually in Transformers, G.I. Joe, Jem and the Holograms, and even another show in Humanoids. And it's the reporter, quote-unquote reporter, Hector Ramirez.
Oh, really?
He's in all of those series.
I didn't realize that.
Yep, he's in 1 or 2 episodes of Jem where he's like doing reports on them.
In the second season.
Yeah.
In the second season, they'll have video that comes out.
That's
and
right.
She does a lot of stuff, which we're not going to talk about second season yet, but I did not realize that.
Yep.
I do know that a lot of the voice actors that worked on Jim and the on Transformers would jump in there sometimes.
Yep.
They had their own lineup, though, and then there was like Samantha Norwick. Am I saying that right?
Samantha Newark.
I was saying it wrong a little bit.
She was a speaking voice for Jericho.
But she was also in Transformers a couple times for a couple special episodes.
Yep.
And it was same thing with Synergy. You know, some of the voice actresses would go on to Transformers once in a while.
Yep.
And vice versa. But it was all under Wally Burr, so that explains a lot of it too.
And because of that voice acting that Wally put together and everything, it worked for Transformers. It worked for G.I. Joe. I think the drama acting itself worked best actually in Gem because they actually had the best voice acting in there, doing the soap opera style, but also real life style, and it worked for them. It just did. And
did you realize that the voices of like the singers, you know, like, and this went for most of them. I think most of them actually. I know for Pizzazz and I know for Jim that they had two separate actors, one that would do the singing and one that would do the speech, you know,
right.
One that would be doing the talking.
Right.
And I don't think it was everyone. I think it was mainly Pizzazz and it was Jim.
That makes sense because it also saves the voice for your two main like antagonists in the show.
Yeah, the ones that would be doing the most singing anyways, the vocals.
Right.
You'd have the other girls in the background, but they would be the main vocals.
Now, you know what one of my favorite episodes was, and was a little story arc for maybe 1 or 2 episodes, was when Kimber felt a little ousted by Gem and Holograms, and Stormer felt a little ousted by the Misfits.
That's one of my favorite episodes.
And those two get together and they do an album together and they do a couple songs. And I think it's probably some of the best work in the entire series.
It is. That was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you again that, you know, Jim thought, you know, oh, she's hanging out with the wrong kind of person.
Right.
But honestly, Stormer was the type that if she just stepped to one side, she would be a hologram.
Yes.
Her personality wasn't violent like the other girls. She wasn't greedy. She just got in with the wrong crowd.
Right.
So as soon as she got with Kimber, you could tell that her personality was totally different than what it would have been with the Misfits.
Agreed.
She was just stepping in, you know, it was the wrong crowd.
And then the songs that they sang were just beautiful. Like
yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes.
I've watched that particular arc multiple times over the years just because I love that little arc there. I don't know why, I just do.
It's definitely one of my favorites. And then in the end, they end up going back to their own bands. And I know that they're just, especially with Stormer, they're just not going to treat her any better. You know?
But you know what?
Maybe with Jericho and them, they'll treat
that friendship does. You do see it several episodes later in multiple episodes where Kimberly and Stormer interact again. And one lets the other one go, or one is just extra kind to the other, or something like that.
Yeah.
And they never lose that friendship, which I love.
Yeah, and it's a shame. You know, it's a shame she got in with a wrong group. You know, she's just not that type. Because I've seen it in high school. That's why I said that a lot of this stuff that was going on could happen in real life.
Right.
A girl gets with the wrong crowd, and it just, you know, it looks bad on her.
Right.
You meet up with someone like in high school and say, oh, this girl's with the wrong crowd, but then it looks bad on her still.
Well, there was an episode with one of the Starlight girls, Ashley. She ran away.
Yeah.
And they had to go find her. And I want to say she ended up with the Misfits somehow.
Yeah, she ends up getting into trouble and everything.
Yeah, but then they take her back and they show her, you know what, there's consequences. You're going to have to do all these chores. But you know what? We forgive you, you know, and we're going to try and understand you more. And it just showed, again... It was almost like watching a TV sitcom / drama, like you've been saying, but as a cartoon geared towards all kids, not just girls. And I love the show. All
right, so we both watched the show a lot.
Yes.
And I would like to talk some about our memories.
Okay.
So I know it's out there. It's not a very big convention. I think it still happens. But I went to a Gym Con once.
It is still happening, yes.
Yeah, I went to a Gym Con once, and I believe, Tony could correct me if I'm wrong in the basement, but I believe it was out, it was near Connecticut, or was it? It was pretty far out there. And so I drove out with a friend. We went out to it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be like BotCon. You know, BotCon with all the toys and such.
Right.
Went into the vendor's room. And I saw all these gym dolls on display, the boxes, everything. And this was before I had a massive collective. I've got a lot of them now. But I went in there and I was like, oh, I love this. And she's like, oh, that's not for sale. That's just for display.
No.
That's just for you to look at.
You want to be able to buy some
And
of
I was
it.
like, well, where's the vendor spots? Oh, right here, this little row. And all they were selling like was remakes of the shoes where they remolded them. And they were selling a couple nude dolls.
Oh, wow.
And that was all there was. And I was like, oh my gosh. I drove like in crazy hours. And at first I was a little depressed because I thought I came all this way and there's not going to be anything to buy.
Right.
And it turned out to be one of my best weekends at a convention because of the actors that were there, the actresses. And I ended up doing the Congo line as Stormer.
Oh, wow.
Because I put this whole Stormer outfit on, too. I was a newcomer to this event.
I remember seeing pictures of this.
I had a guitar made up and everything. And I went out there, and there's people that go there every year, right?
Right.
And they were the popular ones with the convention organizers. So there was only a few of us there that actually dressed up. They were supposed to have a costume contest. But it was a little bit of a downer because they were supposed to have a costume contest. I went all the way out going crazy on this costume.
Right.
And got out there, and because there was only a few there and they thought it wouldn't be fair to the one that's been going for years, they decided to cancel the costume contest. They just said there wasn't enough people. And I was like, I spent like ages putting this together.
Right.
You know, I mean, I went into detail. I mean, I did the makeup, I did the knit stockings and everything. It was crazy. And then they canceled it. And I was like,
that's boo.
I mean, that was another downside, but I'll tell you all the positive stuff when we come back here in a few minutes. Remember the music? Remember the movies? Remember the cars, the fashions, the news, the things that stood out during our youth? It's okay to be nerdy. Join me as I reminisce over the cartoons, the toys, and the video games of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Turn back the clock with Retro Talk.
Weekends on 98.5 XPM's $1 Million Weekend Lineup.
So we were talking about the convention.
Yep.
And I said some of the down things that, you know, I love Jim and the Holograms, and I loved meeting the fans.
Right.
But I haven't mentioned all the great things that happened at that event.
Like what?
Well, as Tony reminded me, there was a burlesque show.
Wait, hold on.
There was a guy actually dressed up as Shayna.
I could see this.
And he was wearing some really tight clothes. You knew this was a guy, trust me. But it was cool though. But I mean, they had all these girls, all these adult people.
Right.
Most of them half of them were women, half of them were guys.
Okay.
And they were dressed up as the holograms, and they got up there and started doing a show.
I would want to see this actually. This sounds really cool.
They would. Most of it was lip syncing,
right?
But they had instruments and they were singing at one point. This was like a concert they put on,
right?
And then they had a burlesque show where someone was just stripping as Jim.
Oh my gosh!
Interesting stuff. I mean, this was definitely more of an adult-oriented convention,
right?
There wasn't a lot of, like I said, there wasn't a lot of toys to buy. I remember it was just. They were drinking. They were having a good time. The singing voice that did, I think her name was Phillips. Her last name was Phillips, Brittany Phillips. She was the singing voice of Jim, right?
Yes.
Well, she was drinking a little bit there.
Oh, no.
Samantha was there, you know, the other voice of Jim.
The speaking voice for Jerica, right?
And her mom was there, too. Samantha's mom.
Okay.
Well, she wasn't on the cartoon, but she was her mom, you know. Because Samantha was only 15 when she started doing for Jim and the Holograms.
Oh, that's right. She was very
young. She was just
young.
a kid.
Right.
And so at one point, here I am, totally dressed up as a Stormer.
Right.
And I've got one actress in front of me, and Samantha's behind me with her mom right behind her. And we're doing this Congo line. I wasn't drinking, but everybody else was mostly drinking.
Right.
Here they are playing all this hard rock music in this ballroom after the concert and I'm just jamming around doing a conga with those guys.
That's awesome.
And it's crazy, right? There wasn't a whole lot of people there either. It was
Right.
probably like attendance-wise, there might have been like maybe 40 or 50 people total.
Wow.
And now, that's not including the actors, of course.
Right.
But it was crazy. And we're out there doing this dance, and I remember I got some crazy shots of me. They had this, it was hot in that ballroom, so they had this giant fan in there, right?
Yep.
And here I am, like Stormer, striking a pose with the guitar, and the fan's blowing on. I'm wearing a purple wig, a blue purple wig. And my hair is just blowing on me, and I'm like, like I'm Stormer, I'm kicking butt. And, that was probably the best part of it, that huge party they had that night.
Oh, my gosh.
Was just crazy.
That's some fun.
And it was. I mean, it blew it away for not being able to buy anything.
Right.
Just that party that we had afterwards. And I remember calling Tony and said, this is crazy, some of the things we did. And
There's probably some things you never heard about. I'm just telling Tony in the basement there.
Yeah, I wanted him, actually. It would have been fun to have Tony there dressed up as Rio or had him dressed up as Eric. I think I was trying to push him to go Eric as his hairstyle at the time.
I think he looked good as Pizzazz.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, I don't know. Pizzazz with a mustache and beard.
Sure.
Maybe, yeah.
Why not? You can dye that.
But, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we had that, and we kind of like just socialized. I remember I sat with Samantha's mom and her and just chatted at one point.
Wow.
We're just hanging out. And this was way before RetroCon.
Right.
So this was kind of like a big deal to me. I'm sitting here just chit-chatting. And so the other great thing about the event, they mentioned it online, where you could have this trade thing, where you could bring out your extra stuff. We have like a parts trade, doll trade thing that it was different from the dealer's room.
Right.
So at one point, I had gotten all these Jim and holograms for like $2 a piece at a flea market, right? They had most of their outfits. It was like $2.50. It was crazy prices I got for them. I took them to the event, right? Mm-hmm. And someone said, well, you should have set it up in the vendor's room. And I was like, well, I didn't have a whole lot. I brought maybe about 7 or 8 of them, but they were complete. And I was selling them for like maybe $25, $30, really cheap with all their stuff. And,
fair pricing.
Yeah, and this one girl came all the way from Australia.
Wow.
With her husband to go to this Gem and Holograms event. And she says, if it weren't for you, Rosemary, I would have went home with nothing. Because they literally had nothing to buy except for shoes. So she bought almost everything I had.
Oh, wow.
She just was like, I'm going to pay for all this. I remember it was like, I made like about $250 off of it or something like that. But it was crazy because she said if it weren't for me, she would have went home with nothing.
Right.
Which was, would have been sad. And I had this one guy, and I think he might still be on my Facebook page, that kept on trying to trade me for a Gem doll for a lunchbox. And I don't even think it was Gem and the Holograms lunch.
Who brings an oddball lunchbox to a Gem and the Holograms?
I can't remember what kind of lunchbox, but I don't think it was Gem and the Holograms. It was something else. And he kept on saying,
I'd like to trade in my Garfield for your Gem and the Holograms.
Yeah, that's what it was like. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I don't want that,
Right.
Because he said, but I really want that doll and I don't have the money.
Oh,
and I was like, what do you do?
Right.
What do you do? But all in all, it was a fun event. It was a fun memory. I wouldn't mind going again if they ever come in Philadelphia. But I think I would probably set up. Mm-hmm. Because with all the extra dolls I have now, and I wouldn't even just bring Gem and the Holograms. I'd bring Barbie. I would bring Strawberry Shortcake. Because if these people, My Little Pony, if these people are collecting Gem and the Holograms, then they're probably into that.
They might be.
I told Tony I probably would have been the best dealer in there, even though I had a few things.
If you set up table, I will come out and sing for you and bring people to your table.
You probably chase them away. But it was an interesting event. So my question to you is, what's your favorite Gem and Hologram memory?
I have a couple, actually. So first things first, I'm a huge Hallmark ornaments collector. So one of the ornaments that came out, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, was actually of Jem from Jem and the Holograms. It's her in her signature pose with the microphone above her head and the Jem logo on it and everything. It's very tiny, but it's very cool. Jen, my wife, and I went to a special Hallmark event about a year later, and the artist who created that ornament signed it for us. So we have that signed by that artist, but also RetroCon 2015, 2016, I think it was, where we had Samantha Newark, the voice of Jerrica Benton there. She signed it for us too, and I had her sign it. But what was really cool, having Jerrica there, having Samantha there, I found her to be so sweet, so kind, and talked to everyone that came to her table. When I went up there, it was me and our friend Trick. Yeah. We went up there and we were talking to her, and I didn't know he was doing this. And eventually he's like, hold on, bro, let me take your phone. He takes my phone, and she records a message for me for my old show, the Bro Show, going, "It's showtime, Bro Show." And I have video of her saying that for me.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And it's so cool. Like, it's one of those things that just makes me go, I have Jem saying the Bro Show. Like, you don't get that often.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it just makes me smile every time. But I also just remember watching the show as a kid, like really getting into it, getting into technology of it, thinking, what was this computer doing these things? How does a hologram work? I want to know. I want to know these things.
And don't let them fool you. Who actually dressed up? Now,
okay.
What was it you dressed up as?
So,
because you were just showing Connor earlier, Connor in the basement.
So for those that don't know, I have an old show from back in the day, and I do it from time to time called The Bro Show. That is me. And if you look on YouTube for The Bro Show, you may find video of myself with a pink wig, and I am lip syncing and singing the Jem theme song in full video in front of a backdrop. And
woo!
Yes, it is. It is because, and this was at least 10, 12 years ago that I did this, so I've been talking about being a Jem fan for over a decade now, even though I was multi-years into this too. The Jem convention I learned of from Retro Rose here and a few of our other friends who had been to it too, and one of these days I would love to go to it, just to go there.
Just to check it out.
Yeah, I've been to a My Little Pony convention. That's a whole other show discussion. But I would love to go to a Jem convention and experience that setup. And I know some of our friends, when we had Samantha Newark at RetroCon and other times at RetroCon, have come dressed up as Jem and the Holograms. I know our friend Scarlett has shown up.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was dressed up as Jem, I think. And with her friend dressed up as Pizzazz. And it was like one of the greatest costumes to walk through the convention hall. And every so often we still get a Jem that walks in with the pink dress and everything.
Yeah, we still get that too occasionally.
Yeah.
And Spirit Halloween has had a couple Jem and Holograms throughout the more recent years too.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, once we're going to talk about toys that have come out, but once we get into toys, we'll talk about some of the toys that have brought back Jem and Hologram a little bit. I mean, even they've had comics in more recent years that have brought the story back a little bit more.
And there was one movie we will not talk too much about.
Yeah, that movie was actually good too, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Right now, I want to talk about the merchandise and stuff, but I do want to give a couple shout-outs to some characters we did not mention.
Okay.
Jetta, one of my favorites.
The English girl that joined the Misfits.
She actually had kind of a Zorana.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had a Zorana, and she liked to play the saxophone.
Yep.
She was bad.
She was
too.
very bad.
She was bad.
I think she was bad.
She was one of the worst misfits. Yeah. And then there was Clash.
Yep.
She was a misfit.
Yep.
Now, can you remember some of the hologram girls, the new ones that came along?
Okay, so there was Shayna Aja, and then what was her name with the
Which one played the drums?
Yeah.
Who was it?
No.
Do you remember?
Oh, the name is eluding me.
Is it Rhea?
Yes.
And then they had Video, that was friends with Holograms.
Yes.
And they had Dance, that was friends with Holograms.
That's right. I just listened to her song earlier today.
Yeah. So there was quite a few new ones in the second season that came along, and I didn't want to leave them out because they had some great characters too. And I want to talk about the toys too, because I have a lot of the dolls.
Yes.
I have the first run in box
Oh, wow.
All the first run of the Misfits and the Holograms.
Right.
But I actually, when we were kids, my sister and I, for Christmas one year, my sister was more into the Jim and the Holograms before me. I was
Okay.
just more of a Misfit fan. I'd come in there and watch the Misfits.
Right.
If something was on. So she ended up getting, and this was actually, when I look at it, what the outfits wore, she got the second edition of the Jim and the Holograms. My mom didn't get the first edition. It was the second edition she
Okay.
got. And then I got the second edition Stormer
Oh, wow.
as a kid. She said, well, which ones do you want? Because I wanted more Transformers at the time.
Right.
And I said, well, if you're going to get me one of them, get me Stormer, my
Right.
favorite character. And at one point, she got on my nerves, broke a couple of my Transformers, and I went in there and tore her gems up. And if I would have realized what they were going to be worth,
Right.
but I do till this day now. It's taken me years to get it, but I have all the first edition Jim and the Holograms and the Misfits. I have the original Glitter and Gold, which was the doll line that came out after the first
Right.
run. Was the Glitter and Gold one, and I have the Roadster of the Glitter and Gold in box.
And the Roadster had the radio in it.
Yeah,
didn't
it had
in
a
the back?
radio in
Yep.
it, yep.
You could listen to your AM radio.
And then I went on to get all the second edition ones in box. I got the Starlight edition, all the
Oh,
Starlight
wow.
Girls in box. I have the original Star Stage.
Nice.
And I have the Backstager, which is actually a speaker that opens up and becomes Jim's dressing room.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever seen that one
I've
or
seen that
not.
before.
I have all of them, and this person's going to, people are listening, so plus she's got a lot of stuff. But I have all the original ones loose.
Right.
Actually, about 2 or 3 years ago, I'll say 2 years ago, I bought them off of a lady I know.
Oh, wow.
She wanted to get rid of her gym dolls, and they have their cassettes, their shoes, their stands, everything with them, $25 a piece.
Heck yeah.
So I bought all of them. Now I've got them on display.
I was going to say
So-
the unique accessory with all the dolls was the fact they came with a cassette.
Yes.
And it had like 2 or 3 songs on each cassette
Yeah.
on either side. It's a totally 80s thing, but they produced music cassettes for Gem and Holograms.
Now, if I remember right, because I've got my cassettes at home, I didn't think to bring any with me. They actually have Jim and the Holograms theme song on one side. Then you flip it over, and it's got that band song, like if it's
Right.
a Misfits or if it's a Jim, one of their favorite songs
Right.
that they liked or something.
I
to
wonder
that
how many
effect.
songs they produced for the show and then all the tapes too. It's got to be near 60 or 70. It
Yeah,
seems like.
there was a lot of songs.
Right.
And I was showing Mike before the show began posters.
Yep.
That came with those. And you know, I'm talking about my collection, but Mike actually has some too. And you have one of the more recent dolls too, right? One of them that came out how long ago was it when that doll came
Okay,
out?
so like as I mentioned before, I have the Hallmark ornament. I have a wig that I wear. We won't discuss that. And then, but the doll that Ms. Rose is talking about here, it was made by a company called Integrity, and they made a series of the Gem and the Hologram dolls. But one of the first ones they put out was for a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive toy in 2015 called Twilight in Paris. And it's from one of the more memorable episodes of Gem and the Holograms, where she's in Paris and she's having a love trio between her, between Gem, Jerrica, and Rio, and trying to decide who really loves him. But the doll itself is both outfits that she wears in the show
Oh, that's cool.
in a particular episode.
Now, is that based off of the original outfit that came
It
with
is.
Jim? Okay.
It's based off the original outfit from the show and also the toy itself. It's about 14 inches tall, and it's the only one out of the Integrity line where all the other dolls came in square boxes and they were sealed. They didn't have like open window or anything. This one, the box is actually shaped like a half triangle. And on the imagery on the outside of the box, it's the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, wow.
And it says Twilight in Paris. And then you open it up, and it's one big triangle. And it has a doll inside featured with its accessories on one side and the other. I'm not a huge doll collector, but there are a few out there that I get. And this is one of those special ones that I just
You'll have
love
to
that I
show
have.
it to me sometime because I can only imagine, how much did it cost when you originally got it? Can you remember?
When I first got it, I think it was like maybe 100, 150.
Now it's probably like way up there, huh?
I have never looked. I don't even want to look. I don't want to be tempted to try and sell it because I love the doll so much.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of those dolls,
Yeah.
they do go for money now. And I really didn't get any of them because I liked the classic ones I had from when I was a kid.
Yep.
But I kind of regret it now that I should have bought some of them.
Yeah, it's one of those things
You know,
where you're a
it's-
kid, you want to play with them. There's nothing, I
Yeah.
agree that that's the better, I think that's the real value in any of these toys like this. And even now, in the last 2 or 3 years, a company called Super 7 has put out 3 3/4 inch doll
Yeah, I
figures.
have those. Now, Tony
Yep.
did buy me some of those. He bought me, and they actually made pop figures of
Yes.
Jim and Pizzazz,
Yep.
too. Pop figures of those, too.
And then, of course, they had the various, everything else out there from notebooks to toys to.
And at one point, they made comics, more updated ones. You were just talking about one that was Transformers and Jim?
Yeah, it was actually G.I. Joe and Jim. And it
Oh,
has,
it's G.I. Joe and Jim.
And it had the characters from called the Dreadnoks dressed up as their alter ego, Cold Slither. We'll be joining you soon.
Yeah.
They're
Here's how Zorana would say it. Cold slither, and we'll be joining you soon.
Yes, it's a crossover cover with that, and there is actually a Transformers cover with Jim and Optimus Prime that's out there too, as I recall, or maybe that's My Little Pony. But again, she permeated everything. The more modern comics that ran for, I think it was about 50 or 60 issues, were a little more modern in their take on everything. And there was also a live-action Jim and the Holograms movie that had come out that wasn't as well received. But in hindsight, I think it was okay.
I did watch that. I did watch that, and my only gripe was they should have brought the Misfits in.
Yeah.
They waited to the very end, like the end credits, to bring them in.
Yeah.
And they had Eric Raymond in it. But I felt like if they would have brung the Misfits in, they would have had more of a storyline, and it would have stayed more interesting.
Yep.
But they didn't bring them into the very end. And when I saw them at the very end, which is a shame because their costumes, their personalities were fantastic.
Yep.
Just that few, it's like 1 or 2 minutes that it shows them.
That's it.
I was like, oh my gosh, I would have loved this movie so much more if it would have had them. But they never had a chance to make another movie of it.
Right.
Because it didn't hit it, and I think one of the reasons why is they should have had the Misfits from the beginning.
Yep. I think
that was the
I think the
downside.
concept of Jim and the Holograms, as it was as a cartoon for 65 episodes and everything, if they ever want to reboot it again, it should be like a limited series on one of the streaming services.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 30-minute episodes or something like that, and just kind of redo the original story with Starlight House
If
and
they
everything.
ever do another live movie, I'm going to tell them, hey, you got to put the Misfits in there too. You can't wait to the very end.
I've got the solution for that. What we do is if they ever do that, we find out where they're filming, you dress up as Stormer again, and we just crash the
We'll
set.
boycott that place.
No, we crash the
We'll
set
say,
and get ourselves
hey,
on film.
Yeah, it's like, bring the Misfits.
That's
because
right.
every movie has to have a bad guy.
Yes.
If it doesn't have a bad guy in a movie, especially if it's an action movie or a movie like that, you have to have the bad guy.
Right.
You have to have the bad guy. But aside from that, I think every movie should have a happy ending.
I agree. And in Jim and the Holograms, its final episode, the final episode, one of the girls gets adopted, and that's the way the series ended. And that's
It ended with a happy ending. They knew it was happening. It's not like Transformers where it just stopped, which
Right.
is a whole new story. We're not even getting into that right now.
right.
But I just want to tell everybody we'll be back next week.
We'll be back next week. Same
Something
bat time,
fun.
same bat channel.
Come sponsor Retro Talk, where your support keeps us on the air. If you want more information, send an email to WXPM985@gmail.com and we'll send you our brochure.
You've been listening to
Retro Talk with Retro Rose.
here on
98.5 WXPM.
Be back next week. Same time, same channel.